Okay. All right, here it goes. Well, welcome to tips for content creators working with retro gaming stuff. I think I must have sent the wrong title to Uplink. It's not just for new content creators. This is focused on people who are trying to do stuff regarding retro gaming content. Most focused around the capture and how to present your content that way. So, before I get started, though, I do want to give a huge shout out to all the vendors that couldn't be a part of this because, it's very awesome that Long Island Retro Gaming Expo was able to do stuff and have more presenters and help promote people in the retro gaming scene. But it does kind of stink that the vendors couldn't somehow miraculously be part of this. So I do want to very politely remind everybody, please support your local game stores. I've often talked about how RetroRGB wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for Retro Games Plus and Chris Crone, the owner. And then ever since I moved to New York City, Brooklyn Video Games has been my home away from home, and the New York crew changed everything about the website. Also, there's a lot of vendors that go to these places in these expos that have stuff that's you can't really find anywhere else. I know I always talk about the Shadow Box guy. I see him at all the ones around here. So just, a polite reminder, if you have the ability to, please continue to support these people, track them down on Etsy or whatever it is that, wherever they sell their stuff, because I don't want to see those people go away. There was always so much amazing artwork and, of course, all the retro game stores. So anyway, jumping into the actual panel itself. I've been lucky enough to have a bunch of amazing content creators work with me and follow the podcast, the website, and all that stuff over the years. And I've learned so much from them. And I've also learned a lot because of massive failures over the years, just trying and failing over and over to get stuff right. And I think I'm finally at a place where I can give some decent advice for content creators. I know this is kind of a weird panel. It's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I wanted to do something unique for Uplink because I've worked with the team before. Ryan's awesome, and hopefully this will go as well as I hope. And hopefully I could point people in the right direction for trying to do any kind of capturing or presenting of retro games. So also, it's 1,000,000 degrees in here, and I live in the city. So if you hear horns or screams or sirens, unfortunately, there's nothing I could do about that. So I'm going to try to stay hydrated-ish and keep going. So some very basic tips to start out is you do not have to spend a lot of money in order to do good retro gaming content. I think a lot of people think that they immediately have to jump into buying a bunch of stuff. And the truth is, unless you're doing specific hardware comparisons, all you really need is a PC and OBS and some software emulation stuff. If you want to, you could do things like get some scalers, use original hardware, get some really good camera equipment to take CRTs and stuff like that. So it's really just about what kind of content that you're trying to create and how far you're looking to go with it. So you definitely don't need to spend anything, and I'll kind of go through a bit of that. But I do want to give some kind of non-technical general tips that might be able to help people that I kind of wish people had told me when I started out. And I think the number one piece of advice I can give is always pretend that you have 1,000,000 followers and you have 1,000,000 people watching, because you could make such a positive difference in people's lives if you just, take the time to get stuff right. And of course, if you make a mistake, if you make an easily fixable mistake, you could accidentally do some wrong. And I guess like some good examples of this is like an opinion about a video game. So take Ghostbusters for the NES, however you're supposed to say it. I loved that game as a kid. It's not a good game, but I have so many absolute wonderful memories of playing that. The music, although repetitive, it's like the movies. I loved the movies. And if I really took the time to do a good video on that, I might be able to add some enjoyment to somebody's life. Maybe they never played that game before, and maybe hearing the way myself or you describe it would make them want to play it. And that's just an opinion. And, if you talk about a game and somebody goes and buys it and they don't like it, that's kind of just the way it works. No disrespect to anybody, but that's just kind of how life works. That's how movie critics, music critics, and all that stuff go. And there's certainly no hard feelings if I've had friends recommend games that I thought were terrible, and I don't dislike them for it. I just know, like, okay, here's how I'm going to base my opinions on stuff. But the other side of that if you go and say, hey, playing Ghostbusters through a NES with this $10 composite to HDMI converter is zero lag and perfect, that's fact. That's not opinion. And, on the negative side of things, you could do some real damage. And I certainly don't want to get too negative on any of this stuff, but I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of emails over the years. And the real sad ones are things like, I'm a single parent. I saw somebody with 100,000 followers recommend this thing, and I just want to play Super Nintendo with my kids and play the games that I played growing up, and we can't even get past level 2 in Mario, and I'm on a budget. What do I do? And it absolutely breaks my heart every time I read those, because there's nothing you can do. You just throw your money in the garbage. So just try and always think, what if you had 1 million followers? Am I going to make a good difference? Could I possibly be doing something wrong? Is there a difference between like an opinion or a technical fact? And especially when it comes to things that have like a finite amount still left in the world, like at the moment, they're still manufacturing Nintendo Switches. So if you do a bad mod to one of those, you could get another one, but like arcade boards, they don't make anymore, and they take a lot of upkeep in order to keep them running. And I've seen people say like, oh yeah, put them in a dishwasher to clean them. And, when you get all the funk off, that means it runs cooler, and cooler's better, right? No, you just told a whole bunch of people to destroy their arcade boards because you didn't do a little bit of checking to see that, hey, water has impurities in it. And even though it'll probably work fine for a week or two, all that stuff might dry out and rot out like underneath where some of the components are. So, and that's actually a pretty documented fact. So just always kind of have a self-awareness of the fact that you could make a really positive or really negative difference in people's lives. But don't be afraid to make content. Just have some responsibility for it. And, I mean that in a very loving way too, because most of the content that I watch is absolutely awesome. And there's so many amazing people out there, and we all make mistakes. I make tons of mistakes. I just bend over backwards, try to not make the same mistakes again, and to check my work and stuff like that. But my philosophy on all this aside, here's some actual technical tips that might help you get started with retro gaming content. And most specifically on the capturing side. One sec. So to start out, I guess let's run through the same scenario that I just talked. Ghostbusters and scalers and stuff like that. So what if I just want to talk about Ghostbusters? The easiest way to get that footage might very well be to just download a free emulator, download OBS, which is also free, and do a screen capture. And, maybe set it to 480p or something if you have a slower computer, whatever else. And kind of have everything set up, capture your game footage there, and then prepare that to talk over. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not trying to compare real hardware. I think that's one of the many reasons I love software emulation. And some emulators even have the ability to just record AVIs, so you don't even need extra software on that. Now, if you do want to use real hardware, you could pick yourself up a scaler and a capture card. But depending on what it is that you're trying to do, that could all be very different. So if you just want to use real hardware to talk over a game, like I do, and like other nutcases like me want to do, we really want to use the real hardware, even though it doesn't make a difference sometimes. If you're just doing it to kind of add visuals to your content and your opinions and stuff like that, you could get something like a RetroTink 2X and one of those $20 capture cards that Epos Fox just did a video on that I always thought were really, really, for $20, it was pretty incredible that you could do that. And it'll be fine. You don't have to worry about anything. But if you're doing a hardware comparison video or something like that, you got to worry about which capture card that you're using. And especially depending on what it is that you're doing, even the scaler that you're using. And I've seen people before do like Atari Jaguar version of a game versus the PlayStation version of the game or something like that, and use one of those scalers that treats the signal wrong, treats 240p as 480i. And in this video, a lot of the things that they were talking about, a lot of the, the bugs in the game or something, they were actually describing what it's like to use one of those low quality scalers. So, you have in a situation like that, you would absolutely want to pay attention to the equipment you're using. Funny too, because if the emulation was good enough, that might even be a perfect excuse to use emulation, because you're talking about the games, not the hardware. But not to get too off topic or anything. So if you need something like that, make sure to get the data path cards are always expensive, but awesome for use like that. You could get Epiphan cards, and even some of the AverMedia stuff can go up to 1080p without compressing colors, without compressing the images. And same thing with the scalers. A RetroTink is amazing, but if you're really trying to dig in and get absolute perfect signal because you're trying to compare something, using an open source scan converter with the custom timings and the setting your phase and really making sure that the signal is set up perfectly would go the distance. And I'm going to repeat myself a lot with this because I don't want to give the wrong impression. If you're just doing a game review or something, none of this matters. It only matters if you have severe OCD and you want to get it perfect, like I sometimes do, or if you're talking about hardware reviews, if you're talking about, you're digging in deep in the game when you're comparing graphics and stuff like that. You need to take uncompressed captures to do frame rate analysis and things like that. It's only if you're digging deep into the game that you need to worry about that. There's nothing wrong with just talking over footage that's, that's just captured any possible way that you could find. Now, I do have some tips after you've captured that video, though. And it really is going to depend how you capture it, how far you need to worry about this. But once you've gotten that footage, you're going to need to scale it to the target resolution of your video, if you need to scale it at all. And you have the option to fix the aspect ratio. Now, the way you do those, once again, if you're just talking over footage, doesn't matter, but it's a pet peeve of mine, especially if you're trying to give a historical representation of what a game was like. So the tips for that are any kind of 2D graphics. So pretty much everything from the 8 and 16-bit era, and a lot of stuff after that, you're going to want to integer nearest neighbor scale. So that keeps all of the pixels and everything square and sharp as you're scaling them up. And you're going to want to do that to whatever is the tallest resolution you could fit on the vertical side. So, for example, if you've captured in 480p and you're going to 1080p, then use free software like VirtualDub to scale that. And depending on the image, you might want to scale it 2 times to 960p and then put like a nice border around it, like a lot of the streamers do and stuff. And so it keeps that sharp integer scale, 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x, nothing in between. Or depending on the game, you might even be able to do that 3 times and have it go past the 1080p window and cut off the top and the bottom and center it. That's totally fine for some games, because a lot of games barely have anything on the top and bottom to compensate for overscan. And the other thing that it's a big pet peeve of mine is aspect ratio. And without nerding out too much, when you capture these games, especially if you use emulation, very often you'll capture them with square pixels. But CRTs didn't have pixels. It just drew lines one at a time. And if you had a 256 wide image or a 320 wide image, it doesn't matter. It would always be 4:3. So if you capture in square pixels, which very often it's much easier to just do it that way, you're going to want to afterwards stretch or shrink the horizontal to fit whatever the size of the screen is. I have guides up on the website for this. I dug in deep to try to get this stuff right. And while it absolutely doesn't matter for just talking over games, I do really like when people take the extra time, and it's not that much work. I mean, like anything else, the first time you do it, it takes a while to get used to stuff. But then once you kind of get used to things and once you kind of get used to the flow of it, you could center that exactly the way you need to. It only adds a few extra minutes. Depending on your software, you might even be able to do all of this. Like I use Adobe Premiere, and I could integer scale with a plugin called the GPU resize, and then I fix the width with just the basic built-in scaler. And I think it really, it's one of those little details where if you're watching a historical video about a game, it gets to be presented in the right way. So you don't have Mario looking super thin or Sonic looking super fat. You have it exactly the way that the developers were testing the games when they were made. Now, if you need any help with any of this stuff, I highly recommend going through the video capture section of the website, and checking out the R3 wiki and Discord. That's a team of people that are dedicated to just going above and beyond on their captures, and they have been such a giant help with me over the years. I owe all of them a huge thank you for their patience and really making my videos a lot better because of their input. And all of this info is up there for free. You know, you can go in there and ask questions, and if people have time, they'll stop and help. And just an awesome group of people that really help get these captures right. And overall, I mean, that's kind of how to get this thing set up with capturing. There's still other options, though. Hold on 1 second. By the way, I'm trying to be less fat, so I'm going with the low carb stuff instead of beer this time. And I'll respond to all the chats after I'm done with this. So the other thing that you could do, whether it's your artistic choice or whether it fits your needs at the moment, is take video of a CRT or even a flat panel if that's what you're looking to do, as opposed to doing video captures. And this is actually something that I did when I first started the website, because I had a couple of scenarios where I didn't understand any of this stuff about video capture. I hadn't made those mistakes yet, or I was in the midst of making them. The R3 group wasn't around yet, and I only had 1 or 2 friends at the time that were really experts enough to help. And I couldn't figure out why, with the equipment I was using, I could see a difference easily when I'm just looking at my RGB monitor. But after I do the captures of maybe pre-mod and post-mod or something, they looked identical. And I didn't realize at the time, or some just looked terrible. And I didn't realize that some of the capture equipment was treating 240p signals as interlaced 480i. So that looked all weird. Some scalers and some capture cards compress colors and even compress the image, even if you try to use an uncompressed codec. And I couldn't get it right. And I didn't understand any of that. And I hadn't met these awesome people yet that taught me these things. So for my comparisons, I took a DSLR, put it on a tripod, all manual settings, of course, pitch black room, to make sure there were no other variable other than whatever I was working on. And those pictures were a pretty perfect representation of what I was seeing with my eyes. So at the time, once I got capture down and once I realized what I was doing wrong, most of the time I feel like capture is a good way to do these things. But at the time, that's all I had, and it worked great. And I got a lot of heat for that. A lot of people didn't really understand why I was doing stuff like that. But I stuck to my guns because I had the proof right there. And in doing so, I actually realized that there's many scenarios that I personally wanted to do that I personally found that video footage or pictures of CRT fit the feel of whatever I was doing better than any kind of captures. And taking video of CRTs is so hard because even if you get everything perfect, there's still the moire effect. I could never say that word right, where you kind of get these weird lines in the video when you're trying to take a picture of a CRT or a video of a CRT. I don't really get that with pictures as much, but there was a few times where I wanted to show Ghostbusters on a CRT TV with a Nintendo console sitting in front of it. And I just felt like it gave you the feel of what I was trying to get across better. And part of that too is the way a CRT actually looks and works. So once again, not to go deep dive nerding out on any of this, but CRTs are an electron gun shooting a beam of light 1 line at a time on the back of a piece of glass. And on the back of that glass, it's etched in where the red, green, and blue colors can hit. And that's kind of what blends together with your eyes because your persistence of vision sees all of this stuff as one image. And in doing that, you get what's most commonly referred to as the mask. So shadow mask or aperture grill. And that's kind of what gives the scan line look. Not to get, not to get a little obsessive here, but scan lines are actually the lines of video. But very often in the retro gaming world, we talk about the space between as scan lines. And on a CRT itself, you're essentially looking at an image drawn by a beam of light, and all of the black space around it, you're kind of looking at a piece of glass, looking through it. So even though you probably wouldn't be able to tell in real time, your brain is perceiving that as depth which is why horizontal scan lines, at least at the moment, will never look right on a flat panel compared to a CRT. They're just horizontal lines drawn across the image, not a full mask over it. So I find very, very often that I want to go above and beyond and try really hard to get shots of a CRT to really get that full feel. And I don't know if that's something that you would ever need to do, I guess, unless you were comparing two CRTs or something like that. But it is something I wanted to mention because it really does give a completely different artistic effect of things. And in my opinion, there is even kind of a time that you might want to do that on a flat panel. And the scenario that I ran into is a very specific one, but I'm going to explain it anyway because I imagine if anybody here is creating content, you might stumble across something completely different, but with the same conclusion. And when I was testing the Rad2X cables, those are the only HDMI cables for 8 and 16-bit consoles that I recommend at all, at least today. Don't know what's coming out next. But they plug into your console and they output a 480p HDMI signal. And I started doing captures of those when I first presented the video, but I had a really big problem with that because when you're capturing 480p, you know, I try to shoot my more higher end stuff in 4K. And how am I going to scale that content from 480p to 4K? Do I do a full integer scale and you know, fit it in a window? That might not be a fair representation then, because your average TV wouldn't look like that. In fact, I don't think any TV integer scales an image even when in game mode. I wish they did for retro stuff. And on the other hand, I could just do a basic stretch, but that might look like garbage. You might actually get it to look a lot better on your TV. So on a whim, I kind of just said, I wonder if I could take a video of a cheap TV, not like a fancy OLED, but for me personally, it was the LG TV I reviewed a year or two ago. That was like $300, and it, you know, it's your average 4K TV that you would find today. And I found that taking video of flat panels is way easier than taking video of CRTs. So I set up my camera, made sure it was 4K 60. 60 frames per second is way more important than resolution. And I set everything up on a tripod, got it perfectly centered, and, you know, played with the focus, and I was able to capture an image that looked very, very close to what my eyes saw in person. And I really felt that was a much, much more fair representation of what it is that these things did. I left my crappy TV's scaler to do the 480p to 4K scaling. I relied on a decent enough camera. I have a Lumix GH5, and while it's not a movie camera, it's certainly a good camera, I would think. And it gave an image that gave you a true realization of what it looked like to have these cables. And your TV might very well be a lot better than the crappy one that I used, but I also thought that was fair because maybe you have two TVs, or, you know, it's always good to have a positive surprise when you get home, as opposed to me integer scaling and sharpening everything up and having you get it home and go, it's good, but it doesn't look like Bob's video. And so for stuff like that, you really just kind of step back and say, what's the best way to capture the content that I'm looking? You know, to go back to the beginning, just capturing with emulation is fine so often of the time, but depending on what it is that you're doing, you know, you might want to look into these other things. And I also got a lot of hate for using a camera to do the Rad2X videos, a lot of negative feedback. And I think one person even made a video about it. And that kind of brings up something else. And I try to always keep my content positive, but life's not 100% positive. So you do gotta, if I'm trying to give tips for people, I also got to talk about the dark side a little bit. And for me personally, one of the biggest problems I have, I've always had, I'm getting better, and I still have, is trying to figure out which comments are people trolling and which comments are people genuinely trying to help. And of course, you know, when I read these comments is also a giant factor. You know, if I just put 100 hours into a project, 40 of those hours are making the video, and the first comment is, hey, you screwed up the capture at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, you get ghosting, you probably forgot to set phase. My response is going to be like, screw you. That's the first thing that you have to say. You didn't like any of the rest of the video. Whereas if I saw a bunch of positive comments first and then that one, I'd probably go, you're right, I messed that up. I gotta make sure not to do that ever again. And that's something that's so important. And people who have been trying to help have completely changed the way I make videos. So much feedback over the years. And you got to take a step back to realize, like, Are you in a grumpy mood when you're reading these comments? Are they in a grumpy mood? Do they not speak English as their first language? Because I am so lucky to have an audience around the world. I just think that's the coolest thing in the world. But I also have to realize that if somebody's comment is a little snippy, it might just be that English is their second or third or fourth language, and they're just trying to get some good criticism across, and I'm just not interpreting it right. So it's one of those things where you really got to just take a step back and go, all right, what are they trying to say? Did I actually make a mistake? Can I try not to do that again? And then there are going to be times, like me with taking video of this of the flat panel. There are going to be times where you go, no, I really thought about it and I made the right move. And I'm going to stick to my guns and I'm going to keep an open mind in case I might actually be wrong. But I think I'm good. You kind of got to have you got to be strong enough to deal with all of that. I don't know if you want to use the word lucky, but I never really fit in anywhere my whole life. So I had to get a thick skin as a kid. And that really helped in all of this content creation. And, I think anything that you do these days, posting a happy picture on Twitter, making retro gaming content, there's always the chance that it's going to get interpreted badly and you're going to have to deal with that. So you got to just keep that in mind when you go into this. You have to have comments on YouTube or you don't get picked up in the algorithm at all. So you kind of have to get stuck in this circle of reading this stuff. And you got to understand that sometimes it's amazingly helpful. And I think some of my harshest critics, some of them like me, some of them don't, but they're all super helpful. And I even if in that exact moment I might not appreciate it, I genuinely appreciate that overall. And that's something everybody's got to keep in the forefront of their mind. Now I'm going to open this up for questions in a second. I guess there's just a few other tips that I could give that I don't want to say mistakes, but things that I could see other people improve upon. I think the number one thing for me that I see all the time is if people are showing footage of a new thing, anything, that's awesome. Show as much footage as you feel like, but at some point, compare it to something else for reference. I was just watching an excellent video the other day about a new product, and they had a ton of footage that they captured properly, and the aspect ratio was right, and they did absolutely everything right, but at no point did they show an option. So while yes, I got a sense of what it looked like, it would have been awesome for if I also got an example of, and here's a lower end option, and while maybe this doesn't stink, there's no lag, but it doesn't look as good, and here's an even higher end option. Having something to compare and contrast to is always really, really helpful. So I think that's always kind of a pretty big tip for that I want to give people. Trying to think of something else. I'm referencing my notes here, and I think I hit all of the main points. It's really just about making sure you understand that retro content is going to be different than modern content. You will never, any system that shipped with HDMI output, you will never have to worry about correcting aspect ratio and stuff like that. So there are things that are very unique to retro, and a lot of modern content you would never even want to take a video of a flat panel or anything like that, so you don't have to run into it. So these are just things that you kind of are the main focus of some retro stuff that you might have to run into. So I think there's official questions here. I'll try to go through anything. If anybody in the chat has any questions for me, I always like to leave these talks open for Q&A stuff, because some of the times, actually very often, that's usually the best part. There's always some amazing questions. So I'll kind of just open it up to anybody that has any questions, especially if I missed anything or anything like that. So feel free to fire away. I guess the first person wants to know what I'm drinking. A tangerine White Claw. These aren't bad. I'm a beer guy, but I'm also, on the chunkier side. So I just try to lose some weight and small steps, I guess. I think there might be a delay, so I'll give it a second for questions to come in. And if no one can think of anything yet, I'll just add other tips. So I guess fire away with questions as you have them. Just to add some other tips of stuff. Lag is one of the things that I talk about often. And it's something that if you don't understand where it comes from and why it's important, you might actually be you might not understand why it's so important, and I totally get that. So if that's the case, always try to think of things like original consoles on CRTs took 0 milliseconds from the time that signal left the console to the time that the signal started to be drawn on the CRT. So if you're reviewing products, if you're buying products like that, you have to understand that anything that you put on a flat panel could potentially add lag. And that's got to be the number one killer for retro games, because anything pre 32-bit era was designed for those absolutely perfectly timed moves, especially in later levels of games. So if you're reviewing any product that has the potential to add lag, you got to keep that in the forefront of your mind. And it really is a bigger problem than many people think it is for those consoles. For more modern stuff, it's not quite as bad, but that's definitely always a pet peeve. All right, cool. The questions are coming in. Will my dishwasher be okay? That's actually, to be honest, one of the things that I was thinking of doing at one point, until I realized there were other better options like ultrasonic cleaners. I was going to take like an apartment-sized dishwasher, one of the small half-sized ones like I have now, and then get distilled water, and then run a few cycles with distilled water, and then put any kind of board I needed to clean in that, because it's the impurities in the water that cause the issues, not the water itself. If you had completely pure water, then as long as you dried it properly, you should be fine. So that was one of the things I would do. People have been talking about ultrasonic cleaners, and they're not that expensive, and they're probably cheaper overall and easier than trying to do what I just explained. So that's probably a better method. You just got to make sure they're dried properly. So some people, after they take them out of the distilled water, purified water, they'll dip it in isopropyl and then hit it with compressed air, and then some people even leave it in a UV light box to dry. When I do kind of washing of stuff, I clean it out with isopropyl and then blow it all out really as good as I possibly can, getting underneath all the chips with compressed air, and then I leave it in the sun just for a few minutes. Not let it bake in the sun, that can't be good for the board, but I leave it in the sun on both sides for a couple of minutes just to make sure that the UV rays get in there and they dry out everything underneath as well. Excuse me. What overall software do you use to edit your videos together? I use Premiere, but the only reason I use Premiere is because all of my friends use it. So if I need tips and I need help with something, I could just send a text message and say, hey, sorry, but can you help me again? And they usually have the answer immediately. But there's other software out there. DaVinci Resolve, everybody says is awesome, and that's free. So if you're getting started, I would try that one first just because it's free. I'm sticking with Premiere because I'm already deep into learning it, and it has that awesome plugin GPU resize that could scale integer for you if you need to. What is the most common reason for video to be out of sync with audio? I don't really know. I don't. There could be a delay. That could be the way your computer settings are set up. It could just be the hardware that you're using. But one of the things I do in my in-person videos is every time I get a new audio interface or a new capture card or something, I'll clap, and then I'll go into Premiere and I'll slow that down to 10%, and I'll keep adjusting the delay ratio in OBS, which is what I use to shoot all of the me shots with, and I'll adjust it until the clap hits at a perfect time. If you're talking about in capturing video games, you could sync stuff up. You could, you could just take like a video with your cell phone of 1 minute of a game, and then like maybe the Sega logo for the opening of a Genesis game, and you could slow it down and see exactly when that starts, and then take your capture and reference that, and then if you need to set the delay that way. The other thing that you could do, the other problem that I hear about is people doing lengthy streams will have a drift of, as the first hour of the stream, everything's fine, but as it goes along, the audio gets more out of sync with the video. And I don't know if anybody has found ways to fix that. You could stop and restart the recording or the stream, but no one really wants to do that. And I think that's a problem that's probably a better question for pro streamers than I would be able to say. So I got you on the recording side, but I'm not really sure what to do on the other side of that. So I would rather not answer than give you bad advice. Another question: I like to try new drinks. I think Tangerine is in my local grocery store. Yeah, honestly, I just, I like all food and drink, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. So I'm always trying new stuff. So yeah, definitely give it a try if you like it. Raw Pixel Subhuman says Q&A wasn't working before. So yeah, if you have any chat or any questions, keep them in here just to make sure. Jeremy says there's just kind of a lot of things to take in, especially for someone who's trying to jump into retro content creation. Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. It's really overwhelming at first, and it's one of those things, like a lot of other stuff in life, where once you've done a couple, you always, I guess a tip I should have added is always expect your first couple of videos to really suck. Even if you're a professional video editor, maybe you're not going to be as smooth on camera the first couple or something. But once you get in the swing of things, it does kind of become like second nature. Another question, any preferred video codec or bitrate? So what I've been doing recently, I used to use Amarek for capture, and it's just terrible. It never works the same way twice for me. So now I use, I have it up on the website. Somebody made me a customized version of OBS that uses the UT video codec. I checked with the OBS team because it was just a prepackaged portable version. It was not a code change that they said I was allowed to host that on the site. So I always wanted to double check with that. But I use that now, and I use the uncompressed UT video codec. And I haven't had any complaints since. The only thing about that is you have to manually set the resolution every time you change games or something like that to make sure you get it right. Hopefully at some point somebody will fork the OBS project and maybe make something designed for retro that could do variable refresh rates and stuff like that. But I leave everything uncompressed, and then afterwards I import that into Premiere. And then depending on the video, I either use H.264 hardware rendering from Premiere, which is really fast, or I do an uncompressed DXNHR, whatever that acronym is, which, for a 10-minute video, that's like 100 gigs. But then I compress it with Handbrake with either H.264 or H.265, usually 64. And you're always going to have to deal with compression artifacts and stuff, but it's no getting away with that no matter what, unless you're only going from your production to a Blu-ray disc or something like that. What kind of equipment do you use for creating your videos? I kind of remember the camera you said, but what about audio recording? So I have gone through so much equipment with that. People that listen to the podcast often complain that I talk about it too much, but I'm in a unique position because I can't put my hand like I'm touching my window with my left hand, and on my right hand I am like I'm pushing up against something else. So I'm in a very small spot, and I'm right by the window, and I'm in a very loud area of Manhattan. So I chose a Rode. What is this one again? The Procaster. Hold on, the name is right here. Yeah, the Rode Procaster, because I thought that this one got the clearest sound out of my voice, and it did the best job getting rid of background noise without muffling it or anything like that. There's the Electro Voice mic that Epos Fox likes a lot. There's that Shure mic that everybody uses. They're both awesome, but this I found was the best one for my scenario. I would love to do a boom mic setup instead, so you don't see this stupid thing in front of my face, but it's way too noisy. It's impossible to do even with audio filtering. I just got a Motu M4, which I'm using for this mic and for my guitar and for MD4A recording for high end, making sure to get the best recording from your consoles. And I've just had nothing but good luck with it in the few weeks that I've had it. And then when I'm done with my videos, you can't do this in live streams, but I always run it through because I have the Adobe Creative Cloud. So I run everything through Audition's noise filter and compressor and noise gate and all that stuff. So, and I think it makes an overall difference. The only issue I do have is when I'm recording my higher end stuff, I don't use this mic because I don't like the way it looks. I use a Rode Lav mic. Once again, I chose the Rode Smart Lav because same reason, it filtered out a lot of the background noises. And I usually record talking into my closet in my bedroom, which muffles the sound enough where it's actually pretty clear. But then when I'm on camera shots, it's actually a different sound because now I'm standing in a different place. I don't have the clothes in the closet to muffle the noise. I have whatever's going on outside. So often I have to take many different takes of stuff just to get rid of that. And I think running it through Audition, filtering that out, does make it match a little bit more. But in a perfect world, I would have a room in a basement with a boom mic, and I would do all of my recording standing in the exact same spot. Even if I'm doing audio only, I would look at the camera the same way I am, so my voice is projecting in the same direction. I got to work with what I got though. And also for when I was doing in-person interviews, I have the oh, I'm drawing a blank. I think I have the box over here. The Zoom F6, because it has 6 inputs, and you could listen through headphones while you're recording. So I could do in-person interviews with multiple people, up to 5 other people, and hear what they're saying. So I could always make sure the audio is good. So that was expensive, but that was great because I've lost a lot of audio in-person interviews. That's actually, if you're doing those, the other advice I would give: 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So if you're doing an interview and even if you have a good recording like that where you could hear what's going on, throw your cell phone on the table and just use the voice recorder app. Get a cheap $150 boom mic, stick that on your camera and let that go too. And more times than you would imagine, you'll end up using one of the other audio sources because something goes wrong. When do you think we'll start seeing somewhat affordable 4K upscalers? So a lot of people are working on trying to solve that problem. And the issue is, there are a couple issues. You need to buy in bulk to get the attention of any of the companies that make the ASIC chips that do it. So if you went in for a run of 100,000 and you said, hey, by the way, that cheap 4K scaler that's in your TV, I could just use that, but I want to enable nearest neighbor scaling and bilinear as well, I'm sure they would do that, no problem, but you would have to buy that many or else they just won't respond to you. So the only other way to get around that is to use an FPGA, and all 4K FPGA chips are still super expensive. So while someone might do it just for fun, they might buy a 4K dev kit, you're talking a $1,500 box. So it would either have to wait till the FPGA technology gets cheaper, which would be at least a couple of years, or you would have to wait until somebody comes out with one of those just scaler on a chips that has selectable scaling options. And that way you could use it for retro, you could use it for modern. You wouldn't just be doing a basic dumb scale of it. Another question: I'd wanted to make a video showing the weird audio issues I was having with my Scarp switch and N64 could be fixed by running only the audio through the 2X Pro. Do you have recommendations for capturing sound as it would occur in a natural environment like you would hear it if you were actually in the room? The Motu M4 has been the best I've tested so far. There's an old M audio card. I think this one right here. M Audio AP192K. This is more of something where if you're doing audio analysis though, and I still need to get another motherboard that could mine. The PCI slot on mine seems to be having issues. But if you don't mind spending the money, the Motu has been the best I've tested so far. But that's a couple $100 and you might not need that. You might be able to just get away with using your PC sound card. There's also an Asus card, the Zonars. You could still get them for like $30. They're not really great for audio analysis like MD Fourier stuff, but just capturing what the sound of a console is, this would be good. But you're going to get some hum and some analog noise that's probably not there. So it really depends on what your budget is and how far you want to go. What do you use to connect your Lav mic to the PC? So when I do these in-person recordings, like the me shots of the video. So first, when I'm doing the weekly stuff and live streams, I'm using OBS and I have an Elgato Cam Link, which isn't great for video games, but it's perfectly fine for me. If I drop a frame or two, it doesn't matter at all. And I run everything through the computer, and I essentially use my GH5 Lumix as a webcam. But when I'm doing these other videos, a lot of people have complained that when I shot like the 4K 60 footage throughout the entire video and put the me shot in 4K 30, a bunch of people said that they noticed immediately and it was pretty jarring. So instead, what I do now is I have the Zoom F6 sitting on my table in front of me with my Lav Mic on. And I have the GH5 where it is, and I use the app, the Lumix app, which is so helpful. You just need a USB-C cable plugged into your PC. You fire up the camera in manual mode, and then you just press the button to USB tether, and you could fully control the camera with your keyboard and mouse. It's so helpful for these videos. That's why you don't have the weird um, focus issue I used to have, where sometimes it would just focus on the wrong part of the screen, because I stand here a few feet away with my keyboard and mouse, and I adjust all of the settings, including focus. So I get that all set up, and then I could trigger recording right here from my keyboard and mouse. So I'll hit record on the Zoom and on the Lumix at the same time. I'll do a quick clap, so there's one loud spike in sound, and then in Premiere, I just put both of those files in, right click and hit create multi-camera sequence and sync on audio. 99.9% of the time it syncs perfectly, but if it doesn't, I have that clap where I could just zoom in and line that the audio up so everything's perfectly in sync. And that's how I get the me shots on that. I would like to upgrade to a 4K 60 capture card, but I'm holding off and saving up because I want to get one of the super pro end ones. That way I could do uncompressed 4K video capture of modern consoles if I really needed to, which I know is overkill, but maybe I'll just kind of give up and get one of the AverMedias for the future. But that's absolutely how I've been doing it, and it seems to work because it's the same exact 4K 60 footage for the me shot as the B-roll, so there isn't that striking change in frame rate. But it would be way easier if I could just do it with OBS, because I hate jump cuts. I don't mean no disrespect. I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody that does that in their videos, but it's so important to me to have a natural take on something. But that means you make a lot of mistakes. So when I'm recording in OBS, I could do 15 takes of something and just go, stop record. When I get it right, label the file, delete the rest, and I'm good to go. But doing that when, I'll end up with 50 takes and I only need 5, from different sections of a video. So then I got to go back and sort through all of them. So while it is absolutely working, I really would prefer doing it through OBS just for the ease of workflow reasons. Yeah, it looks like we're winding down. I think I only have about 10 minutes left. I think the questions are kind of slowing down too. So let me know if anybody has anything else. I'll try to think of any other tips for content creation. The only other thing that I like to do, and this is only personal preference, this is certainly not and it's changed for me too. But when I'm creating the videos, when I do the weeklies, like my weekly podcast, that just the weekly roundup of stuff, I don't practice for that at all. I write a lot of the articles, so I have that in my mind. But if one of the other writers ends up doing something, I'll read it usually when it's published, and then I won't read it again until I'm ready to shoot it, and then I'll just read it right here in front of me. And then I kind of have a fresh take on things. And when I'm doing the Q&As, I never read those beforehand. I usually read them in real time. If I got to do multiple takes, then I've obviously already read the question. But I like that fresh feeling. I like that honesty. But when I do pre-recorded stuff, what I end up doing is usually I capture a bunch of footage of whatever it is I'm reviewing, so I understand what I'm talking about. Then I write a script. And then when it comes to the me on camera shots, I'll read what I wrote, but it won't always be word for word. I'll just kind of do what flows a little bit better just to make it feel more natural, because I always try to get that honest feel in my videos, because I'm never sponsored. I would be okay with that, but like I'm never going to be saying what other people want me to say, and I want people to feel that when they watch the videos. So even when people send me stuff for free to review, I'm still going to give a completely honest opinion on it, and I want it to come across that way, not like I'm reading off somebody else's script or my own. Another question: where do I store all that footage? So the process that I explained before of exporting uncompressed and then compressing in Handbrake leaves you with an incredibly small but very, very high quality file. So I always do that process for the weeklies, even though it adds, 4 or 5 times as long. It's not a 15-minute export. It's, an hour to export uncompressed and another hour to compress it. But I end up with a very small file. So I keep all of that on, I got a 12 terabyte drive in my PC, and then I have a 16 terabyte drive I just bought that I have for all of my backups on there. So I store everything that way. For the main videos, I'm really just going to do hardware encoding, H.264 in Premiere. It's 10 times as big, but it's only once a week. It's not as often. Even interviews I'll do the other way too. So my hard drive isn't as full as you would think it would be with all of these videos, but I keep everything. I keep all the B-roll. I do try to be diligent about, if I don't use B-roll in a video and it's not good, to delete it, because that stuff adds up. And if it is good, I'll mark it off like not used in video in case I need to use it again. I almost never reshoot footage or reuse footage. Because I'm always getting a hair better at the way I shoot stuff. So footage I got in January isn't going to look nearly as good as footage I took today, just because of trial and error. Question, standing up or sitting down? So I ruptured a disc in my back a couple of years ago, and I couldn't sit down for about 3 months. And then I just got used to standing all the time. So that's how I shoot it. I find, same thing with playing guitar, that I play better standing up. It's all about posture, blood flow. I had a couple of friends really into yoga explain the actual scientific reasons why certain things might be better. But I can't get deep in thought and write while standing up, which makes me feel like it's almost as dumb as saying I can't chew gum and walk. But I can't just get sunk into a script and write it standing up. I can kind of pull it off, but I usually grab my laptop and then go sit down at my kitchen table if I'm writing a script. And 2 or 3 hours could blink by, and I'll write a 4 or 5 page script for a 15-minute video, and I'll get really sunk into it that way. I don't think there's a right or wrong reason, a right or wrong way. I think it's just whatever you prefer and whatever works for you. I do suggest trying both, though, because I wouldn't have guessed that everything felt better standing up when talking until I actually did it. I see some of my other videos of me sitting in a chair, and sometimes it just feels a little awkward. So I'm kind of glad I ended up learning this new way of doing it. Another question, do I still use my Scarp modded CRT? So unfortunately, a couple of years ago, actually right exactly at the same time I blew my back out, I kind of went through a hard part, or like a bit of a hardship, lost my job, and sold off so much of my stuff. So I sold off that, as well as a lot of things that I really am sad that I had to. Stuff that you could buy back is always fine, but stuff that you can never get anymore always kind of depresses me when I think about that. However, I did just recap a 32-inch TV. Jose came over and helped me with it. And I'm about to RGB mod that again. It's at a friend's house because I have no room in this little apartment to keep that stuff. But I do plan on RGB Scarp modding that and keeping that to use in the future. But I love the way that looks. I mean, it's almost as good as a PVM. It looks like an arcade monitor. I think it's incredible. I do still really appreciate composite video on any CRT as well. But if you're into sharpness, if you're into getting, if dither blending matters less to you and sharpness that matters more, modding it really is pretty awesome. Excellent question. What help, if any, are you seeking for the upcoming RetroRGB wiki? As much help as I could get. I don't care if it's anything from, grammar corrections to complete, making your own sections. The one unfortunate thing I've learned in the past few years is that I have no time left. I barely even play guitar anymore, and I miss playing so much. So as much as I would have loved to throw my entire life into rebuilding this wiki, not only do I absolutely not have any time to, even if I quit RetroRGB and just focused on that, like there's no way one person could cover everything. So I'm really hoping it's something everybody's going to embrace, knowing that I will always find a way to pay for the hosting. It will never have any ads on it. It will never make any money. I'm not asking for your help to help make me money on a website. It really is going to be something for the community. And if enough people jump in on it, I will actually make it a not-for-profit registered company, just to prove to everybody that your time and effort is going to benefit everybody. You're not just making me money for my beer fund or something like that. What tools do you recommend to enhance PS2 games on an HDTV? Ooh, I'm right now working on a video about that. So I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but there's something coming out that very specifically would work really well with the PlayStation 2. The OSSC is always great, and that's something that you should look into just in case it's for you. The FrameMeister is also great for that because of the way it handles 480i, because the PS2's library is primarily 480i. So that's an amazing device. There's a DVDO scaler, you could kind of hard to find, that does interlaced really well as well. But those are all very expensive devices, whereas the new thing coming out, allegedly, that I'm not supposed to talk about, is a lot less expensive. So because of the majority of PS2 games are 480i and a handful are 480p, it kind of makes it a very unique and interesting console on what scaler you would want to use. Also, because it's primarily 3D graphics, there's almost no 2D stuff on there. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I guess everybody on UPLINK here just got a sneak peek at a video coming out probably next week. So a week and 2 days from now. Looks like there's only 2 minutes left. So if anybody has any other questions, I'm really happy to answer them. I just, once again, I really appreciate everybody watching this. I hope I did an all right job. I've been sick all week, so hopefully I get the enthusiasm level up to what I want it to be, because I really am always excited to do this. Always super happy to help out the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. They've been so good to me. Ryan's awesome. I really enjoy working with him. And once again, not to be a nag, but please remember, take care of your retro game stores that are all local to you. You know, they certainly didn't have it easy with everything going on and not being able to sell for a while, especially around New York. And all of these amazing vendors that sell incredible artwork that normally only really have the opportunity to do that at expos. I mean, just if that's, you know, if you're lucky enough to still have a job and you're in the position to do so and you want that artwork, please take the time to hunt these people down and buy it from them, because I don't ever want to see this stuff stop. There's so many amazing people that are part of the retro gaming community, and I really want all of us to do really well and to keep doing this stuff. And it's up to everybody, myself included, to help keep those people going. So thanks very much to Ryan and the team. Thanks to everybody else that's doing panels, a lot of amazing people, and a shout out to, you know, absolutely everybody that's involved in all of this stuff. So thank you all so much. And I guess I'll just end it now because it's exactly on time. Hopefully this came out okay. So thank you all very much.